Welcome to podcast episode number 13 of the ISPC Tailboard Talks podcast. I'm Mark, your host, and along with me is Jerry, my co-host. How are you doing today, Jerry?
I'm good, man. Good. Good to be back together.
Yes, sir. All right. Well, today, so the power of mental wellness, something I don't think is talked about enough in our industry. We have a really awesome guest with us today that we'll get to in a little bit. Just happens to be named Mark as well. So we'll have the Mark and Jerry show today. But we'll can't wait to talk to Mark. I've talked to him a little bit in preparation for this, and I think you guys are really going to enjoy this episode and share some things and maybe help some people that are having trouble sharing about this. I guess you could call it delicate topic, right? So
for some people, yes.
To this one day. Yeah, for some people, it's hard to share their feelings. So, and I'm me included, probably. I'm one of those old school guys that I think my wife will tell you I am not the most generous with my with sharing my feeling. We all got a little bit of it, right? So.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about you don't want to lose control when you start talking about your feelings, and it's a lack of control.
Yep. So.
Or that's how it's perceived, anyway. Yeah. Speaking of control,
there you go.
Got to talk about our sponsor, T&D PowerSkills. Take control of your line worker training. You control your message, control your delivery, and control your cost. Everybody knows that safety and training managers are challenged these days with the task of controlling their line worker training programs in all those aspects, and things change fast. So you need a program with the flexibility that allows you to do what you need and still retain control of the things that you need to. So you control your message. You customize the program to meet your needs and your training yard requirements. You control your delivery. The flexibility that T&D PowerSkills program offers you to scale from a single unit refresher to a fully DOL certified 8,000 hour program. And you control your costs with flexible delivery models designed specifically for what you need. That's one thing I love about our company. We're not in it so much for the bucks. We're in it for the lives that we save, making sure everybody goes home safe at night. So, tdpowerskills.com. Find out more about us. And if you use the referral code Tailboard 2024, TAILBOARD 2024, you'll get an exclusive 5% discount. So, Tailboard 2024. Look me up, tdpowerskills.com. Take control of your training message.
Excellent. Thanks, Jerry. Always good to have our sister sponsor us again for another episode. So,
hey, we love it, man. It's well worth it for sure.
Yes, sir. All right. On today's ISPC Tailboard Talk, obviously with our episode being around mental wellness, mental health, and such, I wanted to take an opportunity just to share some statistics that I found while doing a little bit of research for this episode and just talk about some things around this, this topic. So,
yeah. And the reason that we're doing this, guys, is because September is National Suicide Prevention Month. And it's more prevalent than you think it would be. Predominantly because this is a male-oriented business and industry, and not only male-oriented, but alpha male. We're mostly all type A personalities, very manly men, a lot of military vets, tough guys. And it's something that we need to talk about because being men and being the tough guys and the alpha males, you don't think about it until it's too late a lot of times, I think. Mark, what did you find?
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. It's one of those things I just don't think is at the forefront because our industry is so much like first responders, right? And we're always on the front lines and responding and working long hours, those types of things. And so a lot of that, gets in the way. So yeah, just some of the things here that I found in research. So suicide is the 8th leading cause of death in the U.S. So number 8. Mental health and addictive disorders are the leading causes of suicide. So We'll get into some things here in a couple minutes about what causes that to be one of the leading causes. These next couple numbers here are actually from the statistical year 2022. So the suicide rate in 2022, 14 out of every 100,000 individuals. When you say 14 out of 100,000, it's like, well, that isn't really that big a number. But when you put it into context, it is a pretty significant number. In 2022 as well, almost 4 times more men died from suicide than women. And then out of those, almost 69% white males accounted for the suicide deaths in 2022. So almost 70% of those suicide deaths on the male side were white males. And then an interesting thing, when I saw this statistic, 94% of adults surveyed in the U.S. think suicide can be prevented. And that's a really high number in my mind, right? Like, if everybody thinks suicide can be prevented, then why aren't we doing more, right? I feel like with the numbers we just talked about and so many people thinking it can be prevented, why is it such a delicate topic in my mind on the male side of the fence, right? Like, if 95% of all adults surveyed think it can be prevented, you think it would maybe be talked about a little more and shared a little more, right?
And Mark, it often, to me, it's talked about a lot after the fact, after your buddy does it, or somebody somebody in the company, or whatever. It's talked about a lot then, and it's talked about, we need to do something, but nothing is ever done. And I think personally, this is my thing. I think it's because of the stigma of mental illness. People have, the suicide ideation is not necessarily brought on by a mental illness. There's a lot of aspects to it that, especially being, I said, we're all, we're macho guys in this industry. We're alpha men. As we get older, bodies start to break down, shoulders, knees, hips, that kind of thing. And then you can't do what you did when you were 20, but in your brain, you're still that 20-year-old tough guy, or, still doing whatever you were when you're that young guy that you should be able to do all these things. And I've seen it as I've gotten older, talking to my friends, I've seen that, this constant pain, this, not being able to get up and down and do what I was doing before, this is bull, man. I should be able to do this. And that leads down that road in some cases. So it's, the stigma of seeking mental help and talking about your feelings and your mental health needs to be addressed. To me, I've lost a couple of friends to suicide, one male, one female. But if we would have talked about it more openly and spoken about it, and if they would have felt, I think that they could have opened up about it and not have been, or at least known that there was somebody there for them and not that was their only way out, kind of thing. I think that would have changed things greatly.
Yeah, and I think, one of the things that, Mark and I talked about when we were kind of sharing information before this podcast is larger companies tend to have programs, right, as part of their healthcare packages for wellness programs, right? And we'll get into that, especially when we talk to Mark. But following up from what you said there, Jerry, the one thing I found, the Bureau of Labor and Statistics has categories, right, that they kind of lump people into. And so specific to this topic, there is no utility data. We as utilities fall into the construction industry, which is a much broader industry, right? And so while we fall into that construction industry because we have a lot of similar aspects, I think we have a lot of aspects in the utility world too that maybe don't align quite as well with the construction world when you talk about the really long hours, the storm work, right? Every time the wind blows, the phone rings and you're off to work. It doesn't matter what's going on in your personal life, right? I missed many a holidays, especially in the summer, where, you're having a Memorial Day or a 4th of July picnic and you got the family over and bam, the phone rings and, well, catch everybody later, got to go to work. You know what I mean? And so, some of the key factors that lead to potentially, the taking you down that that mental wellness path, or I should probably say mental unwellness, right? You talked about working in a competitive, high pressure work environment, right? We're all kind of those alpha males and kind of similar to that military background, competitiveness, sports background, whatever. Being separated from family and friends, right? There's parts of our industry that, doesn't matter where the storm's at, they're going to work it. So, gone weeks at a time, months at a time.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned the chronic physical pain, right? That's another one. And I know a lot of us, including myself, are stubborn. I mean, I don't go to the doctor unless I can't fix it on my own. So it's just one of those things. You know what I mean? If I take enough Advil, I'll feel okay. And and then just
Vitamin
dealing
M.
with. That's right, man. Advil, it works wonders. If two doesn't work, I'll take a third one, right? So, or maybe fourth. But and then obviously the continuous safety risks, right? I mean, while the construction industry has safety risks as well, I think obviously ours are elevated a little bit, especially in the electric utility industry, just because of that possibility that a second chance doesn't lurk around the corner, right? If you make a
Mm-hmm.
mistake in our industry, it may be your last mistake. So,
Or if you make a mistake and one of your teammates or your
yeah,
brothers pays
absolutely.
for it. And that goes into the survivor's guilt
Yeah,
is a huge problem, and I saw that a lot
yeah,
with military friends and stuff like that. That's a thing, man. That's
yeah. So just a couple other statistics here I want to share before we hop into our guests. So, the qualities we just talked about make the construction statistics a good proxy for the utility industry, right? And according to the American Addiction Center, approximately 15% of all construction workers in the US have a substance abuse disorder. That's, in my mind, pretty significant, right? And I know, I worked in the utility industry for 20 years, before getting into consulting and in the utility industry, right? You have your drug testing and alcohol testing and all that stuff, and you have to do it, especially if you have a CDL as well. But to have those barriers in place or those preventions in place to hopefully make sure people aren't coming to work impaired, that seems, again, not a huge number, but larger than it should be, right? And
mm-hmm.
that's compared to when you compare the construction industry to the general adult population, where that number drops down to about 8.5%, almost two times what the normal general population statistic is for substance abuse. It also shows, the CDC shows that construction has the highest rate of overdose deaths among 20 major occupational groups. So again, a fairly big number, 163 deaths out of every 100,000 people. So that's four times the national average. And again, the males, obviously, male-dominated industry, right? That number is much higher for males than it is for other sectors as well. So just puts it in perspective a little, I guess.
The addiction thing is I think the key here is because we do work in such a very physically demanding industry, that you see a high rate of knees,
Yeah,
hips, and shoulders injuries and just fatigue and wearing out. So you get a lot of those pain doctors
yeah,
just writing scripts, and you got to be careful with that. Watch your buddy. Watch
yeah,
watch
yeah,
yourself.
yeah, and then just a couple last statistics here, just kind of to put things in perspective before we really dive into this. In the U.S., you're more likely to die from suicide than by an automobile accident or by homicide. Almost 50,000 people a year to suicide. Comparatively, in 2022, about not quite 39,000 automobile accident deaths. And even homicide jumps down below 20,000. So, two and a half times more likely to die by your own hands than the hands of others, right? And so it's definitely, when you look at and hear these numbers, it starts to put into perspective. You mentioned earlier, Jerry, you may hear this talked about maybe more than others. And I think it's situational, right? It depends the environment you're in and the people you're around and so on. But, those are pretty, almost 50,000 people a year that die from suicide. That's a really large number. And then just lastly, the construction industry has one of the highest rates of suicide at almost 53, about 53 per 100,000 U.S. workers. So that's 4 times greater than the national average. All right. So that kind of just backs up some of the statistics we heard a couple minutes ago. So, I think it's just one of those things, awareness and like you said, we talk about this after the fact. We need to start doing more talking about this before the fact, right?
Absolutely.
And go down the prevention trail instead of, something happened. And, unfortunately, I think our industry is getting a lot better, but you can look at it even from a safety standpoint, not even talking about suicide, but just talking about safety rules and procedures and those types of things, right? How do all those safety rules get adopted, right? Usually something bad happens to somebody and we make a safety rule about it, right? Or we got to make another procedure so that somebody doesn't do X, Y, or Z and get themselves in trouble. So, I think in general, not just with mental wellness, we need to do a better job, probably not just in our industry, in a lot of industries, about being more proactive and preventative than dealing with it after the fact. Like I said, we have a really great guest today that is much more in tune with some of this stuff than probably you and I are. The other thing, before we jump to our guest segment, the other thing that I found, and we alluded to this a little between us here before we started the podcast, is when you're doing research on this stuff, the statistics and the numbers and the information in a lot of cases is not just right there. I had to do some digging to find some of this stuff, right? It's not just like, give me the statistical rates for 2023 and bang, there they are. It's not like that. You really got to dig through a lot of data to find some of this stuff. And is that intentional or is that just the way it is, right? So, but I found it interesting that it was so, I wouldn't say difficult, but it wasn't just right there. I had to really go looking for it to be able to get the information together for today. So, all right, excellent. Let's, Jerry, you want to take us into another sponsor?
Before we get into our guests, we got to talk about our sponsor, which is T&D PowerSkills, one of my favorite places ever and programs ever in the world. Very, very, very customizable to your situation. 78-unit course curriculum. It is designed with the adult learner in mind, and it allows you control. You control your message by customizing the program. You control your delivery with the flexibility, and you can scale it from a single unit refresher to a fully DOL certified 8,000-hour apprenticeship program. If you want to know more about it, all you got to do, give me a call or shoot me a text or an email. tdpowerskills.com. My phone number and email is all over that place. tdpowerskills.com. And if you log in or go there or listening to this, you get a 5% discount. All you got to do is tell me Tailboard 2024 when you talk to me about it, and we'll talk about that. 5% discount. May not seem like a bunch, but it is a bunch. Trust me.
Excellent. Thanks, Jerry. Okay, time to talk to our guest. Today, our guest is Mark Taylor. He is a senior advisor of corporate services at Primary Engineering and Construction in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. So a little about Mark. He's been with Primary for about 5 years now. And previous to that, he worked for an electric utility in Calgary for about 35 years in various roles. He's a safety and training professional with more than 35 years experience in the electric utility industry. Demonstrated leadership to implement safety and training programs to large organizations. He's enthusiastic and passionate about utility safety training and civil construction with the knowledge of how to implement new programs into companies. He is the current chairman of the Interutility Overhead Trainers Association, better known as IOTA, and has been with that organization for over 10 years now. He's also approaching 10 years of being a CUSP, which is a certified utility safety professional. Great organization and affiliation to be with as well. So without further ado, Mr. Mark Taylor, welcome, Mark. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much for having me. Yeah, I was kind of surprised when you guys reached out to me, but I'm quite honored to be on your program today to talk about this. I will try and keep my emotions in check a little bit.
Yeah,
I know. Last week I started writing notes. I was on the road again with my company, and I started writing some notes in the hotel room and started bringing back some emotions again. So
yeah,
we'll try and work our way through this, and we'll see where we
absolutely.
go. Maybe just a little bit of a background on this. I started talking about this at primary 5 years ago, talking about mental health, and it was good for me to talk about it because it was good for my healing to
Hmm.
remember where I came from. We just had our IOTA conference in Boston in August this year, and I finally decided to use this as a safety moment to start the conference and talk about my journey briefly. And it's the first time I've kind of gone out in front of a crowd of about 300 people and done
Yeah,
this, right? And I was stunned by the reaction of it. Let's put it that way. And I thought, you know what? If I can, and I do this, if I can help one person, really help one person, just
sure.
and when I get into my story, you'll see that how it was one person that kind of gave me the push in the right direction.
Yeah. I know I heard good things about your talk you had at IOTA here just this, well, probably about 2 months ago, a month and a half ago. And so, one of the reasons that we wanted to have you on as a guest, Mark, was because of that. And I know Mac, from previous experiences. So no, I think this is it's like you said, it's medication, it's healing, right? It's part of your process to deal with what you had to go through, and we'll hear that here shortly. So pleasure to have you on today. Let's start out, if you don't mind, maybe just give us a little background about your journey, more from a career standpoint, before we dive into the other stuff. Just kind of a little bit about how you got to where you are today. What's the career journey look like for Mark?
Okay, it's a long and winding road.
As most of us are, right?
I started off as when I got out of high school as an apprentice electrician, working in the oil and gas industry is very quite prominent here in Alberta. So I was working on a lot of gas plants and stuff like that. And then in the mid 80s, so I'm going to tell you I'm 60 years old now. So you guys, we can all stop the math, right?
Okay.
So in the mid 80s, the bottom fell out. The oil and gas, I mean, it went down to pennies on the barrel, stuff like that. So I had to find a kind of a new career, and I went to the city of Calgary, electric system, and with the intention of becoming or being an electrician. Didn't quite work out that way. They started me off in the utility as a laborer, and I stayed there for about 10 years. Then I applied for the apprenticeship to be a line apprenticeship into the line apprenticeship trade. I went through pole climbing school and I went through the selection process. And then, right when we were getting ready to go out to the cruise to actually start our work, they shut down the apprenticeship program. And we all probably went through that in the United States as well, where they shut down apprenticeship programs. So from there, I got promoted to being a supervisor of civil works. So looking after the labor and crews and that. And that's when I really started to get into the fact of worker safety, because all of a sudden I had about 50 workers reporting to me that I never wanted to see any of them get hurt. And I didn't know if that was safety's role or my role, and I just took it on as my own role. At the time when I took on that role, we had the worst safety of group out of any of the groups at the city of Calgary. By the time we were done, we went 10 years without a recordable incident. We just made safety a way of life. Then we switched names. We became NMAC. We went through a fatality of a young apprentice, and I was approached to take on field safety at NMAX, take on the apprenticeship program, and take on the trades training program, and become the director of that organization. And I did that up until I retired and went over to. I left. I retired from NMAX and went over to primary engineering and construction. A friend of mine had been working there as the president and CEO. I worked with him at NMAX, and he went over to primary. And he said, "Hey, would you come on over and help us out?" And I think when I started at the company, it was about 175 people, and we were in provinces of British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. We've now expanded to Ontario, and we are now a company of just under 500 people. So
Wow.
Wow.
we're growing. We're growing in leaps and bounds, and we do everything from engineering to design to construction.
Okay.
So whether it be power lines or telecom or what have you. So we've got our fingers in all of that pie.
Excellent.
Awesome, dude.
I didn't realize when we were, and I didn't really do a lot of research into primary, but I didn't realize we have some companies down in the U.S. as well that do the same similar thing. Some of them that we work with quite frequently that are probably pretty comparable in size to primary engineering. Then, so I didn't realize that it was that big a company. Mark, why don't we kind of start down the journey that you and I talked about a couple weeks ago? And again, you're obviously more than welcome to share as much as you want, and we'll kind of just follow this path where it takes us through the rest of this. And tell us a little bit about when you talked to me that day. You mentioned about ways and means, and so maybe start out a little about, I know you have some stuff that you want to share, and I think is very important that people that are dealing with these types of things understand that there's ways out of it, right, and there's means that can get you there, right, and so please share that with us. I thought it was an excellent thing.
Okay, so would you like me to start kind of a little on my mental health journey and then get into the ways and means?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yep.
Well, I can do that. So I'm not sure how long I struggled with mental health. My mental health has been improving over the last 7 years since I originally got help, and and it's hard to kind of roll the clock back because you never really talked about it. We never, I'm going to say I probably struggled with mental health problems for 15 to 20 years, where you couldn't talk to anybody. It was, you grew up in that culture of just suck it up, man. Like we all have our issues, we all have our problems. Like you got to suck this up, right? But what I was very hard on myself, extremely hard on myself, and I don't know where that came from. But I was constantly berating myself for everything I did. Everything I did was never good enough.
Mm-hmm.
I found very little satisfaction in anything. I would body shame myself. I would punch myself. I would bang my head against things. It just kind of, I get into by myself, and it was just this constant berating of myself of, yeah, I'm overweight. I understand I'm overweight, but it would just be, furious at myself for overeating, furious at myself for over drinking. I would continually put myself down. I can give you an example. Like I'd go on a golf course, and I'm a decent golfer. I'm a decent golfer. And I'd go out there and I'd hit a bad shot. And we all hit bad shots. I mean, even the pros hit bad shots.
Yeah.
But I would be yelling and swearing at myself and calling myself names. I don't want to get into that here, but
Yeah.
I wouldn't throw a golf club, but like people would be around me listening to this, just going like, okay, like, holy cow, buddy, you got to let it go. Like it was only, you only missed the green by maybe 10 feet or something like that. You
Yeah.
got to let it go. I couldn't do that. I used to call myself an idiot all the time. Just, you're an idiot. You're an idiot. You're stupid. You're stupid. Fly off the handle at the goofiest little things. So we live in Calgary. We get snow. I get home from work and the sidewalk wasn't shoveled, and I'd just fly off the handle with my wife and my son. I do want to take a moment here. My son's a third-year power line apprentice, and it's his 31st birthday today, so I'd like to say happy birthday to
Happy
him.
birthday.
Awesome. Happy birthday.
I just want to throw that in there. Thank you. So my family, my son and my wife walked around on eggshells. They never wanted to tell me bad news. They kept stuff uh, somewhat, it was just kind of okay. We don't want to get into this with him today, right? And yeah, I just kind of went out of my way. I was just miserable. I didn't want to talk to people. I didn't want to go out in public. Really just wanted to be alone all the time, be alone. Like if my wife, Shelly, and she's a fantastic woman, if she would say, hey, let's go here and do this, I would find any excuse not to go. Any excuse. And that could be a family event, whatever event. It was just, I just want to stay in the house and I just want to watch TV.
Hmm.
And that was kind of where I was at. I was very nervous in a large crowd, very nervous. Kind of got this anxiousness about me where I didn't want to interact. I'd kind of maybe pull back to a corner until I had enough to drink that I could get out of that zone and kind of get into pushing myself to maybe be a little bit more of a life of a party type of guy. I would overeat. I would overdrink. I would drink to excess until I blacked out just about.
Hmm.
And then I would wake up in the morning and my wife would say, do you know you did this? Or you know you did that? And that would start the spiral. And I kind of call it this spiral down, where all of a sudden I'm beating myself up saying, hey, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm not going to overeat. I'm not going to overdrink. I'm not going to fly off the handle. I'm going to work out. I'm going to do all these things. But the cycle just fell back into the fact of I just started those things all over again later on in the afternoon. And I was having a tough time breaking that cycle, and I call it the toilet bowl. Really, I was just going down this toilet bowl,
Hmm.
and I didn't actively want to commit suicide. But if I died today, I was okay. If I got into a car crash without my family in the car, without hurting somebody else, I was good. If I was on a job site and I fell off the side of a building or something like that, I was good with it. And I thought about this every day. I thought about dying. And and I thought that was normal. I thought everybody thought about dying. And it wasn't this big extravagant funeral or anything else. It was just kind of like I've had enough. I've had enough of being here. I went through all of that. And again, the biggest thing is I never felt satisfied. Never, like things were, hey, I could have that one great piece of pizza, and that lasted about 3 or 4 minutes. That one drink felt good for a little bit. I
Hmm.
would buy something. I went out and bought a new vehicle. Hey, this new vehicle's all great, and I was happy for about a half an hour, and then I was kind of like, okay, that's enough of that. Now I got to pay for the vehicle, and you shouldn't have bought this vehicle in the first place because you can't afford this vehicle. Now you're going to have to work all this to pay all this off, right? So it was just that whole piece of it, and I became very good at hiding. A lot of people did not, whether it be at work, family, friends, what have you, did not ever say, hey, maybe he's not right. Maybe we should talk to him because I would hide it well. It was just like, no, if we were on vacation, I would just bury myself into a book saying, hey, this is the way I like to relax is to read my book.
Hmm.
Really, I didn't want to be around people and I didn't want to interact. So I got good at hiding that. I got good at hiding in my office. But all of these things were just kind of played on me. And about that time, I started, this is about 10 years ago, I kind of thought, hey, maybe I'm not right. I'm not sure because the thoughts of dying were becoming more and more prevalent. And it was not once a day, it was 5, 6, 10 times a day that I just didn't want to be here anymore. And I believe the only thing that maybe prevented that was I had a wife and a son. And I had family and friends and I just don't know if I could do it. Right. But about that time I was on social media. not a good thing to be on social media, but there are some good parts to social media. So that's kind of my worst case of where I was at, and it does get worse than that. But I started reading the Player's Journal. So the one thing I did love about Twitter, for example, or X or something, whatever it's called now, is I was a little bit of a news junkie. And I love the fact you could kind of get the news in like 30-second bursts, and you could open a story if you wanted to open a story. I started reading this Player's Journal, and these are pro athletes, and these are the people are playing in the NHL, the NFL, all these things, and they're starting to talk about a little bit about their journey and how they feel. And all of a sudden, some of these thoughts are mirroring my thoughts, and then they're seeking help, and I'm kind of going, oh, I should maybe look at this. So I did go online a couple of times, and you can do this. You can go onto Google or what have you, and you can go on and bring up mental health tests, and you can do mental health tests, and it'll kind of tell you where you're at. Of course, I manipulated the results so it didn't look like I had a mental health issue because I still didn't want to talk about having a mental health issue. So I would get the initial results. You just do this online quiz, and then all of a sudden, like, nah, I'm not like that. No, I don't. No, I don't think about dying. So that and no, I don't berate myself, and no, I don't overdrink, and no, I don't overdo this. And I would manipulate the results, but in the back of my mind, I knew something wasn't 100% right. So then this all kind of led to this. I call it the meltdown, and I'm kind of glad I had the meltdown. We were away on a boys' golf trip. We were down in Coeur d'Alene, beautiful Coeur d'Alene, and that was kind of one of our places I was going on a golf trip. And the pressures from work, the pressures from everything were just insurmountable. And I'm going, hey, I got to get out of here. This golf trip's going to be great for me. I'm gonna have a great time. Well, I'll tell you, I played about the worst golf of my life. I was lucky if I could thud the ball down the yard, down the fairway 50 yards, and just berate myself and get into arguments with these guys that are buddies of mine, and get into these arguments and everything else. And the one night we were having an argument, I was having an argument with my roommate over which hockey game to watch and who was the better hockey. I got quite aggressive on it, and not physical aggressive, but just really like a hockey game. At the end of the day, we got no money riding on. He went for a walk and he came back and we sat down and he asked me if I was all right. And I started crying and I was just like, I don't think I'm all right. And he says, I don't think you're all right either. And he explained to me what his wife had gone through. And it was very similar to what I was going through. And we sat there all night and I probably bawled like a baby over everything that had happened and how bad I was and really how terrible a person I thought I was, or I was at the time, or am. And he stayed with me. We came home from the golf trip. I sat down with my wife and I said to her, I said, I think I need to make an appointment. I don't think everything's all right. Um, from there, I made an appointment with a family doctor. So if you don't have a family doctor or you can't, try and get a family doctor. Try and get somebody that understands a little bit about you. But you can do this through a walk-in clinic as well. I went to my family doctor. I kind of broke down to her. She said to me that she had seen some signs and symptoms over the years. We did we did a test, a couple of them, and that was my journey of getting better. That kind of leads us to the ways and the means of things. And so there are ways of getting better. Now, in Canada, if you want to go into a provincial program or a government program, it takes about 3 months to get into this program. That's how big the waiting list is. So that's one way in. And I was going 3 months. Like I can't do 3 months. Like I'm here. I've emptied my soul, and now you're going to tell me 3 months. There was some other online programs that I could take, and And I know Mark has pumped up a couple of websites here, one in Canada and one in the US, where you can, there's online help for free where you can talk to somebody. And I would recommend you do that. Um, so that's part of the ways, but the other means that I talk about is this takes money. So I decided to go with private counseling, and most company benefit programs have a cap on how many dollars you can spend. The average counselor, I'm going to say, is $150 to $250 an hour. So if you've got $1,000 in your benefit plan and generally they put them in buckets. So like massage is in a bucket, mental health might be in a bucket, physiotherapy. So you've only got so many dollars. We were fortunate. My son was not living at home, like he was moved out and working and everything else. I kind of want to put that in perspective.
Yeah.
He was doing his adult thing, and our house was paid for, our vehicles were paid for. I was making good money. So I decided to go the private route. And that private route cost me about $200 a session. After the first session, I was going twice a week. Then it kind of went down to once a week. But, and this went on. I was going at least once a week, and then kind of down to that went on for a period of about 3 months until I got stabilized. I was giving drugs to help with my mood. I'm still on drugs today. I'll probably be on drugs for the rest of my life, just so everybody knows that. And I'm fine with that. I am absolutely fine with that. But my counselor was excellent. Like we delved into all sorts of issues of, like and you kind of going into counseling is tough. But I got to tell you, I left there the first day and I wanted to run a marathon. I'd never felt so high and so satisfied. And she was kind of like, I got you. We're going to be okay here. And we're going to get into these things on why you're so tough on yourself. And I was just like, well, I don't want to dig into my childhood. I had a decent childhood, or a good childhood. I'll say that, a really good childhood. We weren't rich, but we didn't do without. Let's put it that way. I'll throw this example at you guys. If there was, after the 72 Summit Series, that's when Canada-Russia Hockey Series, the international team started coming over to Canada to play. If they played in Calgary, my dad got us tickets. If there was a new Canada jersey out, I got that jersey. So I want to be clear on that. Like it was just,
Yeah.
we grew up. It was, not a lot of excess or extras, but we didn't do without either. But she had me. And so we delved through all of these things. And a lot of it was the pressure I was putting on myself that I just wouldn't let myself escape. And so we worked on some things to escape. One of those things that I love to do is love to drive. And I got to tell you guys, I am the world's greatest rock and roll, blues, country singer on the face of the planet in my car, going down the highway.
Aren't we all? Aren't we all?
So if you pass me on the highway, you are going to see me singing.
I kind of thought this was going to happen, and we're coming up on about an hour, and I don't want to. We're probably at a good point right now to stop. We're definitely going to have you back for part 2 of this. We have so much more to talk about, and so why don't we?
I want to hear more later about the Players Journal. We got to talk about that. We have to talk about. I have so many questions about you because Mark, I think I mirror a lot of what you said that started your journey to mental health. So yeah, there's a whole bunch to talk about. So yeah, our listeners need to hear more about this, but we can't do it right now. So we'll come back on the next episode and really dive into the meat of it. Now that we've got the good,
we got everybody's whistle wet. Like, come on,
we're getting into the good stuff now, man.
Yeah.
So guys, as always, thank you for joining us for this one. And let me get down here. This podcast was brought to you by T&D PowerSkills. guys, take control of your training. Control is key in all aspects of your life. In your training, in your line worker safety, it is the same way. tdpowerskills.com. Find out more about us. Take control of your message, take control of your delivery, and take control of your costs. And if you mention this podcast, receive a 5% discount. Use the code TAILBOARD2024 to get that exclusive discount. And as always, the views and opinions shared in this podcast are the personal viewpoints of the participants and may not necessarily reflect the stance of the Institute for Safety and Power Line Construction or its staff. It is highly advised you consult your company management before implementing any actions or policy changes. Please support our sponsors bringing this content to you. And for more episodes of ISPC Tailboard Talks, subscribe in your favorite podcatcher and be sure to leave a review. We'd love to hear from you. For this half of this episode, we're done, man. We'll see you in just a little bit for the next one, or we'll see you later for the next one. Sorry.
Yep. Thanks, Mark. Can't wait to talk to you more. And we will be back on the next episode for the remainder of the conversation with Mark Taylor.
As they say in Canada, part deux.
Part two. Yes, sir.